Okay, here's just a quick recording to help you prepare for the finish of Unit 7. We have the 713 lesson, which is preparing for the unit test. And as you know, these are all just reviews of the previous lessons from Unit 7. So make sure that you go through these online activities again. The West, Realities and Myths of the Old West, Putting It All Together, Strike a Match for Labor, Samuel Gompers in his own words. And be sure to read through the Chapter 20 highlights, the Chapter 21 highlights, the Chapter 22 highlights, Chapter 23 highlights, and the end. And I wasn't going to read these to you, but you know what? I changed my mind and I think I will. So let's get back here. Chapter 20 highlights. The Transcontinental Railroad and other railroads that followed spurred Western settlement and the growth of the national economy. The U.S. government granted land and money to railroad companies. The West attracted diverse groups of people, including immigrants from Russia, Eastern Europe, Germany, Scandinavia, China, Canada, and Mexico, who all shared a desire for economic opportunity and a fresh start. Miners often preceded other settlers in a region, but left as mining towns grew and mining companies bought the surrounding land. Mining was common in parts of California, Nevada, Colorado, the Black Hills of Dakota, Idaho, and Montana. Cattle ranching began in the open ranges of Texas with cowboys herding longhorn cattle. Other rail lines were extended into Kansas. Ranchers moved their livestock on cattle drives to the new railheads of Abilene and Dodge City. The era of open-range cattle ranching lasted only about 20 years and ended because of overgrazing, severe blizzards, and fencing off the range by farmers using barbed wire. The timber industry in the West began in Oregon and Washington as companies logged trees to supply lumber to a growing nation that used vast amounts of wood. Oil was discovered in 1890 in California, Kansas, Texas, and Indian Territory and supplied industry and transportation with fuel and lubricants. Some Texas cities grew and flourished within the resulting oil boom. Increased settlement in new industries and commerce took a toll on the environment, resulting in the loss of native grasses, the clogging of rivers and streams, the pollution of soil and water, and deforestation. The Homestead Act of 1862 gave way to 160-acre parcels of land for settlement. And when the Oklahoma Territory was opened in 1889, the entire territory was claimed by homesteaders within a day. Many settlers resented the railroad companies, which sold some of the land they received from the U.S. government for profit. Land speculators bought large tracts of land and resold it to settlers at higher prices. Life as a homesteader in the West, and on the plains in particular, was often difficult. Families worked long hours in difficult conditions and harsh climates. Severe weather, grasshopper invasions, and scarce water forced many settlers to return east. Railroads, telegraphs, mass production, electrification, telephones, and other innovations brought major changes in how and where people lived and worked. The Transcontinental Railroad, completed at Promontory Point, Utah in 1869, united the nation in ways not previously imagined. Andrew Carnegie transformed steelmaking while John D. Rockefeller dominated the oil industry. Innovations in the railroad business were adopted in other industries and became part of modern business. These included vertical and horizontal integration, monopolies, and trusts. Railroad innovations and government incentives improved the nation's rail network but reduced competition. Inventors McCormick, Eastman, Bell, Edison, Westinghouse, and others paved the way for dramatic changes in science, industry, and culture. Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, Jay Gould, John D. Rockefeller, James Duke, and J.P. Morgan used every possible means to build and control their industries. Early government attempts to regulate interstate commerce, eliminate monopolies, and protect consumers generally failed. Andrew Carnegie and others made enormous donations to foster education, but this gospel of wealth did not stop their exploitation of workers during the era Mark Twain called the Gilded Age. In the years after the Civil War, business and industry grew, but laborers suffered under harsh living and working conditions with little compensation. Capitalists favored the minimal regulation offered by a laissez-faire economy that affected both blue and white-collar workers. Organizers reached out to help workers addressing working conditions and wages by forming unions. By the 1870s, depression, blacklisting, fear, and a railroad strike resulted in government action against organized labor as well as the rise of strong labor advocates. The Knights of Labor first organized garment workers and then, under Terence Powderly's leadership, embraced all producers, both owners and workers, with goals such as an 8-hour workday, equality for women, and elimination of child labor. On May 1, 1886, what began as a strike turned into the Haymarket Riot. The riot wrongly identified the Knights of Labor with anarchists, causing a decline in union membership. Samuel Gompers filled the gap by creating an alliance of craft unions known as the American Federation of Labor to bargain for wages, working conditions, and the length of the workday. Another organizer, Eugene Debs, formed a union of both skilled and unskilled railroad workers. Debs' union brought the Pullman Company and the railroads to a halt with a strike that required government intervention. Socialists and other groups like the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies, offered alternatives such as seeking ownership of the means of production and the formation of one large union for all workers. By World War I, the only union success story was the American Federation of Labor. Though the AFL made a difference in workers' wages and working conditions, much more remained to be done. Immigrants came to the United States in increasing numbers during the 1880s. They were pushed by factors such as the decline of small farms in Europe, famine, and religious persecution, and pulled by factors such as abundant work, cheap food and land, and political tolerance of religious minorities. Major immigrant groups and where they settled included Irish in large northeastern cities, German and Scandinavian in cities and farms of the Midwest, Eastern and Southern European Jews, Eastern and Southern Europeans mostly in the Northeast, Eastern European Jews mainly in New York City, Chinese and Japanese in the West Coast and the West. The century of immigration to America occurred in two waves. The first was about 1820 to 1840 and was made up mostly of immigrants from Northern and Central Europe. The second was from about 1880 to 1924 and was dominated by the Southern and Eastern Europeans. Castle Garden was the country's first official immigration center, but it was replaced with a new facility at Ellis Island in New York as immigration increased. Angel Island in San Francisco processed immigrants from China and Japan. Immigrants arriving at Ellis Island were treated fairly well, submitted to interviews and physical examinations, and were processed relatively quickly. Asian immigrants arriving at Angel Island were treated poorly, were processed slowly, and were often turned back. Immigrant groups were held together by strong family and ethnic ties, as well as by a network of ethnic churches, synagogues, schools, newspapers, theaters, fraternal lodges, and banks. Immigrant groups adopted American values and traditions while preserving their ethnic customs and identities. Tensions between immigrant parents and their American-born children often ran high, and a generation gap resulted from differences in outlook. Many immigrant groups faced discrimination, threats, and violence from nativists who saw their cultural and religious traditions as suspicious and un-American. Opposition to immigration grew so intense by the turn of the century that a congressional commission was formed to study the issue. The Dillingham Commission issued a report that denigrated immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe and prepared public opinion to support new anti-immigration laws in 1820 and 1824. And there you go. Be sure you go through your previous lessons, review the reading guides, look at old quizzes and checkpoints. You can go back in the gradebook and look at your answers that you gave for those, and look through your old notes and prepare for the Unit 7 test. When you're ready, you may take the Unit 7 test Part 1. We are not doing the Unit 7 Part 2 this time around, so you can go ahead and just do Part 1 of the Unit 7 test. Good luck, and do your best. Good luck.